Ethan stood in front of the towering gates of the royal palace, his heart pounding. The city of Andara stretched out behind him, filled with the bustling life of Zelvoria's grand capital. He had never seen a place so full of beauty and power, its streets lined with towering buildings of crystal and gold. The architecture was otherworldly, its curves and designs unlike anything he had ever imagined back on Earth. But there was something else in the air, a sense of tension that Ethan couldn't shake. He was here on official business. Earth's future depended on this mission. A fragile diplomatic effort was at stake. He had to keep his cool, to be as calm and collected as the humans back home would expect. But the warning echoed in his mind. Stay away from the royals, especially the princess. Those words had been drilled into his head by his superiors before he left Earth. The Zelvorian royal family was dangerous, unpredictable, and most of all, incredibly secretive. No one, they said, truly understood them. And yet, here he was, standing at the gates of their palace, about to attend a royal banquet. The invitation had come out of nowhere. Ethan had expected it to be another routine meeting, discussing trade, agreements, and the future of humanity's expansion to Zelvoria. But this was something more. This was an invitation to the Empress's private banquet, an event only the most trusted, maybe even the most important diplomats were ever invited to. He couldn't turn it down. But he had also been warned not to interact too much with the royal family, especially not with Princess Liara, the only daughter of the Empress. As Ethan entered the grand hall, his eyes widened at the beauty of the place. The walls shimmered with a soft golden light, the ceiling soaring high above, adorned with intricate patterns of light that seemed to dance with each passing moment. Alien species from all corners of the galaxy mingled, exchanging laughter and words in a variety of languages, yet somehow it felt like they were all speaking the same language of wealth and power. He walked through the crowd, trying to keep his composure, but his eyes kept darting toward the center of the room, where a grand staircase led up to the Empress and her family. There, at the top, stood Princess Liara. Her beauty struck Ethan like a bolt of lightning, unlike anything he had ever seen. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her skin glowed like polished marble. Her eyes, sharp and full of intensity, were a deep shade of violet that seemed to shimmer in the dim lighting. But it was not just her beauty that caught Ethan's attention. It was the way she carried herself, graceful, confident, and undeniably powerful. His gaze lingered for just a moment too long, and he quickly tore his eyes away, embarrassed. But it didn't matter. She had already seen him. Ethan's heart skipped a beat when she descended the staircase, her every movement drawing the eyes of everyone in the room. People parted like the sea as she walked, her presence undeniable. And then she was standing before him. "Human diplomat," she said, her voice smooth as silk but with an edge of authority. "I hope you're finding Zelvoria to your liking." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to collect himself. This was the moment he had been warned about. He had to stay calm. "Yes, Your Highness," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of nerves inside him. "Your planet is beautiful. I've never seen anything like it." Princess Liara smiled, a small, knowing smile that made Ethan feel like she was looking right through him. "I'm glad you think so, but I think you'll find more than just beauty here tonight." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Her eyes, full of mystery, continued to gaze at him. He could feel the weight of her words, the challenge in them. It was as though she was testing him, and he wasn't sure if he was passing or failing. Before he could respond, she offered her hand to him. "Shall we?" she asked, her voice low and inviting. The moment he took her hand, the room seemed to blur around them. It was as if time slowed down, and everything faded away except for the princess. His mind raced. He had been warned to keep his distance, to avoid the royal family, Yet here he was, dancing with the most powerful woman on the planet. Liara's grip was firm yet delicate, and she led him through the crowd with ease. As they moved, Ethan felt every eye in the room on them. He could feel the whispers behind his back, the eyes that followed his every step. He had read about Zelvorian politics, how the royal family was known for their manipulation and their tendency to keep outsiders at arm's length. And yet, here he was, being pulled deeper into their world. "You're different from the others," Liara said, her words almost too soft to hear, though her voice was laced with a clear curiosity. "I can sense it." Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't know how to respond. "Different?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes," she said, her eyes locking with his. "Most diplomats come here with agendas, but you... there's something else about you. Something human." The way she said it made Ethan feel like he was being examined under a microscope. He wasn't sure whether to be flattered or frightened. The music played on, but Ethan barely noticed it. His world had become a dance of its own. He found himself getting lost in Liara's gaze, in the way she moved so effortlessly, like she was born for this moment. The dance felt like a test, one that he wasn't sure he could pass. Yet, for some reason, he didn't want to stop. Her eyes softened as they moved in time with the music, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan felt like he was the only person in the room with her. There was something about her, something that made the warning in his mind fade into the background. He was aware that he should be careful, that getting too close to Liara could mean trouble, but he couldn't help himself. "I was warned about." "You," Ethan said suddenly, his words slipping out before he could stop them. Liara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What did they warn you about?" "That I should avoid the royal family, that it was dangerous." Liara's lips curved into a smile, but it was not one of amusement. There was a sharpness to it, an edge that made Ethan feel uneasy. "And yet, here you are," she replied, her voice dripping with challenge. "Dancing with me." Ethan didn't know how to answer. He had been told to stay away from the royals, to keep his distance, but here he was breaking every rule, and strangely, part of him didn't mind. As the dance continued, he realized he had stepped into something far larger than a simple diplomatic mission. There was more to this planet, to its royal family, and to Liara than he had ever imagined. And the warnings he had received were only the beginning. The night continued, and the grand banquet in the palace's ballroom moved like a dream. Ethan tried to stay focused on the task at hand, but his thoughts kept returning to Princess Liara. Her presence had an almost magnetic pull, and he couldn't shake the feeling that she was far more than what she appeared to be. As the music played, the guests around them began to fade into the background. It was just him and her. Ethan glanced down at her hand, still lightly resting in his. He knew the rules. He was here to represent Earth's interests, to build a bridge between two very different worlds. But he couldn't ignore the way Liara's eyes sparkled with an intelligence he hadn't expected. She wasn't like the other royals he had encountered. There was a depth to her, an unspoken understanding that made him both uneasy and intrigued. "You're quiet," Liara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, yet laced with a hint of challenge. "What's on your mind, human?" Ethan didn't know how to answer. He had been warned that the Zelvorian royals were manipulative, skilled in reading others, and experts at hiding their true motives. But Liara wasn't like anyone he had ever met. There was no hidden malice in her tone, no sign of deception. She simply seemed curious. "I was thinking about how different our worlds are," Ethan finally said. "Your planet, your people, the way you live. It's all so different from Earth. But at the same time, there are similarities too. We both want to survive, to grow, to be more than we are." Liara nodded, her gaze softening. She gave him a small, approving smile. "You are wiser than you look, human. Perhaps you are not so different after all." But her words only raised more questions in Ethan's mind. He was aware of the ancient history between Zelvoria and Earth. Earth had been watching the Zelvorian Empire for decades, waiting for the right moment to approach, to negotiate for resources and safe passage into their territory. But he had never expected anything like this. A dance with royalty, an invitation to the heart of the palace, and the princess. There was something about her that didn't add up. As they danced, the music shifted to a slower, more melodic tune. Liara guided Ethan effortlessly across the floor, her movements smooth and graceful, like water flowing in a stream. She led him expertly, as if she had done this 1,000 times before. Ethan, on the other hand, was out of his depth. He had danced at weddings and parties before, but nothing like this. His heart beat faster with each step, each passing moment. He wasn't sure if it was the dance or the woman leading him that made him feel this way. "You're not afraid of me," Liara observed quietly, her words cutting through the music. "Most people would be. You've been warned, haven't you?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes, I've been told to stay away from you, to keep my distance from the royal family. But—" he paused, glancing at her. "You don't seem dangerous." Liara's lips curved into a small smile. But it wasn't the kind of smile that reassured him. It was knowing. Like she was aware of something he wasn't. "Danger is relative," she said softly. "You think I'm harmless, but you're not seeing the full picture. There's more going on in Zelvoria than you realize." Her words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He had known this was no ordinary mission, but he hadn't expected the princess to drop hints like this. He had expected politics, trade agreements, perhaps some minor negotiations. But this felt like something more dangerous. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Liara's eyes locked with his, and for a moment she seemed to study him like a puzzle. "I mean that the Empress is not as she seems. Neither is the royal family. We have our own secrets. We have enemies." Ethan's mind raced. He had heard rumors, whispers from other diplomats. There were talks of unrest within the royal court, of strange alliances being formed in the shadows, of an impending war that no one seemed to acknowledge. But no one had ever mentioned anything concrete. No one had ever spoken of this kind of threat. "You're speaking in riddles," Ethan said, trying to sound calm, even though his pulse was quickening. "What are you talking about?" Liara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she guided him toward the far end of the ballroom, away from the crowd. The guests were still dancing, lost in the music, but something in Liara's demeanor told Ethan that she had more to say. Her steps were swift and purposeful, and Ethan could feel the change in the atmosphere, as though they had entered a more secretive, quieter world. Once they were out of earshot, Liara stopped and turned to him. "The Empress is not only trying to maintain power here. She's hiding something from the rest of the galaxy, something dangerous. And I believe you, humanity, could be the key to stopping it." Ethan's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. What could humanity possibly have to do with this?" Liara stepped closer, lowering her voice so that only he could hear. "You don't know it yet. But your kind has a unique role to play. The Empress is trying to secure an alliance with the Gorath, an ancient alien race that's been watching us for centuries. They've been planning to invade for years, and the royal family is trying to negotiate a peace. But there's a catch. The Empress plans to offer me as a bargaining chip." Ethan's mind struggled to process her words. The Gorath were known to be brutal, war-hungry beings. If they were planning to invade, then the entire galaxy would be in danger. But why would the Empress, who seemed so powerful, resort to such desperate measures? "And you?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does that Mean for you? Liara's gaze darkened. It means my fate is tied to this alliance. I have no choice but to comply, unless someone does something about it. Someone like you. Ethan's mind raced. He had been warned not to trust the royal family, but he hadn't expected this. Liara wasn't just the princess. She was a pawn in a much larger game, a game with stakes far higher than anyone had imagined. I didn't come here for this, Ethan said, his voice thick with uncertainty. I came here to negotiate peace, to represent Earth. I didn't sign up for politics or intergalactic conspiracies. Liara's expression softened, but only slightly. You're already in it, Ethan. You're part of this now, whether you want to be or not. The Empress has made sure of that. A heavy silence hung between them, and Ethan realized that his mission had just taken a drastic turn. He had thought he was here to help his people, to build a relationship with Zelvoria, but now he was tangled in something much darker. The secrets Liara had shared with him had opened his eyes to a galaxy full of hidden dangers and power struggles that he couldn't possibly have prepared for. Liara's voice broke through his thoughts. I didn't ask for this either, you know. But I will fight to protect my people and to protect Zelvoria. If you want to help, you'll have to choose a side. Ethan stood there, torn between the world he knew and the one Liara had just shown him. His mission had never been more complicated, and the weight of the decision ahead of him felt heavier than ever before. The weight of Liara's words lingered in the air long after she had walked away. Ethan stood alone in the shadowed corner of the ballroom, his mind racing. The grand banquet, once filled with warmth and elegance, now felt suffocating. The soft murmur of voices, the music, and the laughter all seemed distant. All he could think about was the conversation he had just had with the princess, the Gorath. An ancient alien race, the Empress's alliance with them, and the deadly game they were playing. The more he thought about it, the more Ethan realized how out of his depth he truly was. He had thought this mission was just about negotiations, about trade and peaceful relations between Earth and Zelvoria. But now it was clear that something far darker was unfolding right under his nose. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of his fellow diplomats. A group of Earth's most trusted representatives had been invited to the banquet, but they hadn't seemed particularly interested in the royal family or the secrets surrounding them. They were more concerned with sealing the deal with Zelvoria, ensuring Earth's place among the stars. But as Ethan rejoined them, he noticed a shift. There was something cold in their eyes, something that had not been there before. Ethan, you look pale, said Marcus, one of the senior diplomats from Earth. What's wrong? I'm fine, Ethan replied quickly, forcing a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. How could he explain what had just happened? How could he tell them that everything had changed? But his hesitation didn't go unnoticed. Marcus looked at him with suspicion. You've been talking to the princess. Haven't you? Ethan nodded slowly. Yes. A murmur of concern spread through the group. It was no secret that the princess was a controversial figure. Some diplomats had even claimed that her influence over her mother, the Empress, was stronger than anyone realized. The royal family was known for its secrets, and those who got too close to them often ended up on the wrong side of things. You've been warned, Ethan, Marcus said, his voice low. The royals are dangerous, especially Liara. She's not as innocent as she appears. Ethan felt a pang of frustration. He didn't want to believe it, but part of him knew there was truth in Marcus's words. The princess had confided in him, had told him things she shouldn't have, and now the warning was beginning to feel more like a curse than advice. I know, Ethan muttered, but something's not right. I think there's more to this than we're being told. Marcus gave him a cold look, then turned away, muttering something under his breath. The other diplomats slowly followed, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. As The evening wore on. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time he turned around, he saw the cold, calculating eyes of the royal guards, their gaze never leaving him. He tried to ignore it, but the unease grew with every passing minute. Was he just paranoid, or was something truly wrong? Later that night, as the banquet began to wind down, Ethan was summoned to a private room by one of the Empress's aides. He had been expecting this. He had known that his time in the palace would eventually lead to a more formal meeting with the Empress herself. But what he hadn't expected was the tension in the air. There was a sense of urgency in the aide's voice, a quiet fear that seemed to hang in the air. As he followed the aide through the corridors of the palace, Ethan's mind raced. Had the Empress learned what he and Liara had talked about? Had their conversation been overheard? And if so, what did it mean for his mission? The aide led him into a grand, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with ancient tapestries, and the air smelled faintly of incense. At the center of the room sat the Empress herself. Her presence was commanding, her eyes sharp and calculating, yet there was a strange sadness behind them. "Diplomat." "Ethan," she said, her voice smooth yet cold. "I trust you are enjoying your stay on Zelvoria." Ethan bowed slightly, trying to hide his discomfort. "Yes, Your Majesty. It's been an honor to be here." The Empress's eyes narrowed as she studied him. "I've heard you've spent quite a bit of time with my daughter. Princess Liara seems to have taken a liking to you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Was the Empress aware of their conversation? Was she testing him? She's very intelligent," Ethan said, trying to sound casual. "I was just trying to understand Zelvoria better." The Empress smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "I see. Be careful, diplomat. There are forces at play in my court that you do not yet understand. Forces that would not hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens the stability of our empire." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. The Empress's words were like a warning shot, a threat disguised as advice. "I assure you, Your Majesty, I'm only here to help," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the unease in his chest. The Empress's smile widened, but it was colder now. "Of course, I am sure you believe that, but I think it's time we make something clear." Before Ethan could respond, the doors to the room slammed shut behind him and the lights flickered out. In the sudden darkness, he heard the sharp click of metal against stone. Guards were surrounding him. The Empress's voice, now sharp and unforgiving, cut through the silence. "You think you can play both sides, Ethan? You think you can charm my daughter and use her for your own gain? You think you can turn the tide of our empire with your naive ideas of peace?" Ethan's heart raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. He had been set up. The Empress had known all along. His interactions with Liara, his curiosity, had been seen as a threat, a betrayal of the royal family. "You are a pawn in this game, diplomat," the Empress continued. "And now, you've made your move. But it's too late. The consequences of your actions will be far greater than you realize." The sound of footsteps echoed through the room, and Ethan felt hands grab him from behind. He struggled, but it was no use. He had underestimated the Empress's power, and now he was caught in her web of manipulation. As he was dragged from the room, Ethan realized that his mission had been turned upside down. He had thought he was here to help Earth, to create an alliance with Zelvoria. But now, it seemed that he had been caught in the middle of something far more dangerous. And it wasn't just the princess who was at risk. It was the future of both Zelvoria and Earth. The door slammed shut behind him, and Ethan was left in the dark, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. Ethan awoke to the cold, hard floor beneath him, his body aching. His head throbbed, and his hands were bound tightly behind his back. The last thing he remembered was being dragged out of the Empress's private room, the cold words of betrayal echoing in his mind. He had been captured, imprisoned by the very people he had come to Zelvoria to negotiate with. His eyes slowly adjusted to the dim light around him. The room was small, barely more than a stone cell, with no windows and only a narrow, heavy door. The air smelled musty, and the silence was suffocating. Ethan tried to push himself up, but the pain in his chest reminded him that he had been roughed up during the capture. His body screamed in protest, but he couldn't afford to stay still. He needed to escape. He needed to get out before it was too late. A soft click echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps. Ethan stiffened, his heart racing. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, cloaked in shadow. Ethan's pulse quickened, but the figure wasn't a guard. It was someone he recognized. "Liara," he whispered, his voice hoarse. The princess stepped forward, her face illuminated by the faint light from the corridor. Her eyes, normally so, calm and composed, were filled with urgency and something else. Regret, perhaps. She moved quickly, kneeling beside him and cutting through the ropes that bound his wrists. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet tension. "I never wanted this to happen." Ethan winced as his hands were freed, the circulation returning to his stiff limbs. He rubbed his wrists, feeling the burn of the rope. "What's going on, Liara?" he asked, trying to gather his thoughts. Why did the Empress do this to me?" Liara's eyes flickered, and she stood up, pacing. "It's not just you, Ethan. It's all of us. I tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. My mother—" Her voice trailed off, and she stopped in front of him, her expression haunted. "She's not just protecting Zelvoria, she's protecting herself. The alliance with the Gorath. It's not a choice. It's survival. And she'll do anything to secure it, even if it means sacrificing me." Ethan shook his head, trying to process what she was saying. "What do you mean? You're the princess. Why would your mother—" "She doesn't see me as a person, Ethan," Liara interrupted, her voice rising. "I'm just a tool in her plan, a pawn in her scheme. The Gorath want me, and my mother is willing to hand me over to them to secure peace. I thought I could change things, but—" She paused, her voice breaking. "It's already too late." Ethan's heart sank as he realized the depth of the situation. The princess had been forced into this role, caught in the middle of a dangerous game she had no control over. The Empress wasn't just playing politics. She was risking the future of Zelvoria and perhaps even the entire galaxy for the sake of her own power. "Why are you helping me?" Ethan asked, his voice thick with confusion and anger. "You know what your mother is capable of. She'll stop at nothing to keep me in here." Liara's gaze hardened. "I can't let her do this. I won't be the one to bring Zelvoria to its knees by giving up everything. But I need your help. We need to act quickly before she has the chance to complete her plans with the Gorath." Ethan's mind raced. He had been caught in this web of deception, but now he saw the bigger picture. The future of Zelvoria and the survival of his own people depended on stopping the Empress and her dangerous alliance. The Gorath were ruthless, and if they were allowed to invade, it wouldn't just be Zelvoria at risk. Earth was on the brink of expansion, and if the Gorath could control Zelvoria, they would have the upper hand against humanity's plans. "I'm in," Ethan said, his voice firm. "But how do we stop her? How do we stop the Gorath?" Liara's eyes softened for a moment, a flicker of gratitude passing through her. "There's a hidden chamber beneath the palace, an ancient archive where the royal family keeps the most important secrets. My mother has used it to store documents and information about the Gorath's invasion plans. If we can get there before she does, we can stop this." Ethan nodded. "How do we get there?" "The guards will be everywhere." Liara's lips curved into a determined smile. "I've spent years studying this palace, Ethan. I know its secrets. "Follow me." She helped him to his feet, and together they made their way out of the cell. Liara moved like a shadow, silent and swift, gliding through the corridors with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime navigating the palace's hidden passages. Ethan followed closely behind, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. He had gone from a simple diplomat to an unwilling participant in a dangerous game of politics, espionage, and war. But now, there was no turning back. They reached a narrow, almost invisible door hidden in the farthest corner of the palace, just beyond the royal gardens. Liara used a hidden key card to unlock it, and they slipped inside. The chamber beyond was cold and dimly lit, lined with rows of ancient scrolls and sealed containers. It was a place of history, where the most valuable secrets of the royal family were kept safe. Liara moved to a console at the far end of the room and began typing quickly, her fingers moving over the alien symbols with practiced ease. Ethan watched as she accessed the royal archives, pulling up files and documents that detailed the secret alliances and military strategies of Zelvoria's rulers. "The Gorath are planning a massive assault," Liara said, her voice low as she scanned the information. "They've already sent advanced fleets to the borders of Zelvoria's space. The Empress is trying to buy them off with me, but it's only a matter of time before they demand more. They'll use Zelvoria as a staging ground for their invasion of Earth." Ethan's heart dropped. This was worse than he had feared. The Gorath were not just seeking peace. They were planning an all-out war, using Zelvoria as a base to launch an attack on Earth. The consequences of this could be catastrophic. "For humanity, we have to warn Earth," Ethan said urgently. "We have to tell them what's happening. They need to prepare for what's coming." Liara nodded, her face set in determination. "We will. But first we have to stop my mother. If we don't, the alliance with the Gorath will be sealed, and there will be no turning back." Ethan's mind raced as they gathered the critical documents. He knew they had to move quickly. The Empress's plans were already in motion, and if they didn't act fast, Earth could be facing an enemy unlike any it had ever known. But as they turned to leave the chamber, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. Liara froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the hidden blade at her side. "They know," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "They've found us." Ethan's pulse raced as he followed Liara down the winding corridors of the palace. The air was thick with tension, and every sound seemed amplified. The soft creak of the ancient wooden floorboards, the distant echo of footsteps, the faint rustling of robes. It was as if the entire palace was alive, holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. They had just uncovered the royal family's deepest secret, the documents that revealed the truth about the Gorath and their plans for invasion. Now they were running out of time. The Empress would stop at nothing to protect her alliance with the Gorath, and they couldn't afford to let her complete the deal. If they didn't act fast, Earth would be caught in the crossfire, and there would be no turning back. Liara led, Ethan through a hidden passageway, her pace quick but deliberate. He could see the determination in her eyes, the weight of everything she was fighting for. She was not just a princess anymore. She was a woman with a cause, someone who was willing to risk everything to protect her people, her world. Ethan couldn't help but admire her bravery. "We're almost there," Liara whispered, her voice steady despite the danger they were facing. "Once we reach the Empress's private chambers, we can stop her from sending the final transmission to the Gorath fleet." Ethan nodded, his thoughts swirling. This had escalated so quickly. He had come to Zelvoria to negotiate peace, to help build a bridge between Earth and this beautiful, powerful planet. But now he was in the middle of a political war, caught between a ruthless empress and a desperate princess. The weight of his choices had never felt heavier. They reached the end of the passage, where a large, ornate door stood. Liara moved to it quietly, placing her hand on a hidden panel beside the door. The door clicked open with a soft hiss, and the two of them slipped inside. The room beyond was dark, but the faint glow from the outside light filtered through the large windows, casting shadows across the floor. At the far end of the room, a large desk stood, papers scattered across it. On the walls, portraits of previous rulers hung, their eyes cold and watchful. The Empress's personal quarters were a study in power and control. Everything about the room spoke of her authority, her empire, her people. But Ethan couldn't help but feel that it was all built on a foundation of lies. Liara moved swiftly across the room, heading straight for a hidden drawer in the desk. She opened it, pulling out a small device, an encrypted communication unit. She glanced at Ethan. "This is how the Empress sends her orders to the Gorath," Liara said, her voice tight. "If we can intercept this, we can stop the final phase of the invasion." Ethan took the device from her hands, studying it carefully. He had no idea how to use it, but he knew they didn't have time to waste. "How do we stop it?" Liara's gaze softened for a moment. "We have to send a message to the Gorath fleet, a message telling them that the deal is off, that we'll fight back. If we can do that before my mother activates the signal, we have a chance." Ethan nodded, determination settling in his chest. "Let's do it." Before he could act, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The guards were coming. The Empress knew they were here. "Quick!" Liara urged, her voice urgent. "We have no time!" Ethan rushed to the device, trying to make sense of the controls. Liara stood beside him, watching the door anxiously. The seconds felt like hours, the noise from the hallway growing louder with each passing moment. "Come on, come on," Ethan muttered under his breath as he worked the buttons. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the device powered up. He selected the Gorath fleet's communication channel, praying that they would be able to get through. "Message sent," Liara said, her voice filled with a note of hope. "Now, we just need to get out of here." But as she spoke, the door to the room burst open, and a group of royal guards stormed inside. Their eyes locked on Ethan and Liara, their hands reaching for their weapons. "Stay where you are!" one of the guards shouted, his voice cold and commanding. "You're under arrest for treason!" Liara stepped in front of Ethan, her posture proud despite the danger. "You don't understand," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We've already sent the message. The Gorath will know we're no longer part of this alliance. It's over." The lead guard laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think they'll listen to you? The Empress has already made her deal. The Gorath will come and your message will be useless. You're just a traitor, Liara." Ethan's heart raced. This was it, the point of no return. They had done what they could, but it didn't matter if the guards didn't believe them. The Gorath would receive the message, and they would know that Zelvoria's leaders had betrayed them, but there was still one last chance. Liara wasn't done yet. "Get ready," Liara whispered to Ethan, her eyes hardening. She reached into the folds of her dress, pulling out a small weapon. The guards didn't see it coming. In one swift motion, she threw the device at the ground, releasing a burst of bright light that blinded the guards for a few moments. Ethan took the opportunity. Without thinking, he grabbed Liara's hand and pulled her toward the door. They ran, the sound of footsteps chasing them. The palace was alive with the sound of alarms, and guards scrambled to stop them. But Liara led Ethan through the secret passageways, her knowledge of the palace guiding them to safety. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with the Empress herself. Her cold eyes locked onto Ethan and Liara, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. "You should have stayed out of this," the Empress said, her voice low and dangerous. "You've ruined everything." Liara stepped forward, her eyes defiant. "You're the one who ruined everything, Mother. You sold Zelvoria's future for your own power." Ethan could see the emotion flickering in the Empress's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a hard, unyielding resolve. She raised her hand, and 2 guards stepped forward, weapons drawn. "You will regret this," the Empress warned them, her voice cold. "All of you will." But Liara wasn't afraid. She stood her ground, refusing to back down. "No, Mother. This time it's you who will regret it." Before anyone could react, there was a sudden rumble, a distant explosion that shook the entire palace. Ethan's eyes widened. They had done it. The Gorath fleet had received the message, and they were pulling out of the deal. Zelvoria was no longer under threat of invasion. Liara's face softened, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. But the Empress didn't back down. She turned to her guards, signaling them to act. But the damage had been done. The Gorath knew the truth. The Empress's plans had been exposed. As Liara and Ethan made their way toward the palace's exit, the realization hit them both. They had won. The Gorath would no longer invade. The future of Zelvoria and Earth was secure. But as they stepped into the light of the outside world, they both knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for peace had only just begun, and there were many more battles ahead.